In the ancient hills of Judah, where the wind whispered through the olive trees and the sun painted golden shadows on the ancient stones, there lived a young man named Ezra. From an early age, he stood out for his extraordinary gift for solving problems and devising ingenious solutions to everyday challenges. With his skillful hands and sharp mind, Ezra transformed rough wood into useful tools and developed more efficient methods for harvesting crops. His fame quickly grew among the neighboring villages, and soon everyone said that this young man had been born with a special gift from God. His mother, Deborah, a woman who feared the Lord, watched her son with a mixture of pride and concern. She saw how the constant praise and admiration of others was beginning to feed something dangerous in the young man's heart, a trust that was slowly moving away from dependence on God. What Ezra did not yet know was that his life was about to change completely. An unexpected visit would open a path before him that would test not only his abilities, but mainly his faith. It was a hot summer afternoon as Ezra worked in his outdoor workshop, putting the finishing touches on a new harvesting tool. Sweat dripped down his forehead as his skilled hands shaped the metal with precision. Then a shadow fell over his work. "What a fascinating piece of work," said a hoarse, experienced voice. Before him stood an elderly traveler, leaning on a carved wooden staff. His long, white beard contrasted with his lively, attentive eyes, which examined Ezra's work with interest. The old man introduced himself as Eliezer, a merchant who traveled between the great cities. With engaging words, he began to tell stories of a prosperous city beyond the desert, where artisans and inventors were treated as true treasures. A place where Ezra's talent could shine much brighter than in the simple hills of Judah. "In Petra," the traveler explained, "your creations could serve not just a small village, but entire caravans. Imagine how many lives you could impact with your gift." The old man's words lit a fire in Ezra's heart. All night long, he couldn't sleep, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He saw himself already established in the great city, respected and admired by important people, his name known along all the trade routes. The next morning, determined, he began to plan his journey. With meticulous attention to detail, he calculated the necessary provisions, studied the caravan routes, and prepared his best instruments. His mind was so occupied with preparations that he barely noticed his mother's worried gaze, who watched his movements from the doorway. What Ezra didn't know was that Deborah had spent the night in prayer, and the Lord had placed in her heart words that would change the course of that story. On the eve of his departure, as Ezra was packing his last provisions in the golden light of dusk, Deborah approached silently. Her heart was heavy, not because she feared her son's departure, but because of what she saw growing in his spirit. "My son," she called softly, sitting down beside him, "before you go, I must share something the Lord has placed on my heart." Her words were gentle, but they carried the weight of divine wisdom. Ezra stopped what he was doing and looked at his mother. The light of the setting sun illuminated her face, revealing lines of expression that told stories of years of faith and experience with God. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding," she said, quoting the words of King Solomon. "In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." A meaningful silence fell between them. Ezra deeply respected his mother and knew she had a special connection to God. But deep inside, a louder voice rang out, the voice of his own confidence, fueled by years of success and recognition. "Mom," he replied with a confident smile, "I appreciate your concern. But you see, I've planned everything down to the last detail. I have maps, plenty of provisions, and my skills have always helped me find solutions. Surely God has given me these gifts to use." Deborah watched her son with a mother's eyes that saw beyond the surface. She saw in him not only the pride of youth but also the danger that lay ahead, a test that God would allow to transform her son's heart. As night fell, mother and son shared their last meal together before the great journey. While Ezra slept, dreaming of his future glory in Petra, Deborah lay awake, her prayers rising like incense before the throne of God. Dawn would bring the beginning of a journey that would be very different from what Ezra had imagined. The desert awaited, not only with its dunes and storms, but with lessons no map could foresee. The first few days of Ezra's journey seemed to confirm his confidence. The young man followed his precisely planned route, using his skills to overcome every small obstacle that arose. When one of his tools broke, he improvised an ingenious repair. When he met other travelers, his creative solutions to everyday problems earned him praise and extra provisions. "See, Mom," he thought as he walked under the blazing sun, "my skills are more than adequate for this journey." Each small success fueled his confidence that he had made the right decision. On the fifth day, however, the desert began to show its true colors. The wind changed direction unexpectedly, bringing with it dark clouds that loomed on the horizon. Ezra consulted his maps and meticulous notes, but nothing had prepared him for what was to come. The sandstorm loomed like a golden, threatening wall. In a matter of minutes, the world around Ezra was transformed into a chaos of howling wind and biting sand. His references disappeared, swallowed up by the dense curtain of dust that surrounded him on all sides. "Stay calm," he told himself, trying to use the logic that had always served him so well. "Every storm has an end. Just wait and recalculate the route later." But when the storm finally passed, Ezra realized that he was completely lost. The harsh midday sun no longer offered the guidance he had expected. All the reference points had changed. His water supplies, which he had calculated so carefully, were beginning to dwindle alarmingly. For the first time in his life, Ezra felt the crushing weight of his own insignificance in the face of the vastness of the desert. It was then that his mother's words began to echo in his mind with painful clarity. The confidence in his own abilities, which had previously seemed so solid, now dissolved like water in the desert sand. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky blood red, when Ezra finally admitted to himself a life-changing truth. He no longer had any answers. But what he didn't yet know was that his true journey was just beginning. Exhausted and desperate, Ezra staggered across the arid landscape as the sun began its relentless journey across the morning sky. His last drops of water had been drained, and thirst now burned like fire in his throat. His lips, cracked and parched, could barely form the words his heart was finally ready to speak. "Lord," he whispered, sinking to his knees in the scorching sand, "forgive my arrogance. I trusted too much in my own wisdom, and now I am lost. Please do not abandon me in this desert." It was a simple prayer, born not of the eloquence he so prized, but of sheer necessity. For the first time in his life, Ezra had no plan, no ingenious solution, nothing but hope in divine mercy. It was in this moment of complete surrender that a figure began to materialize on the undulating horizon. At first, Ezra thought it was a mirage, another cruel illusion of the desert. But the figure became clearer, a man with a staff, leading a small flock of sheep. The shepherd, who introduced himself as Benaiah, was not a man of many words or great sophistication. His calloused hands and sun-scarred face told the story of a simple life spent tending his sheep and contemplating the wonders of God. "The Lord led me here today," Benaiah said simply, offering his water skin to Ezra. "I don't normally bring my flock to this region, but something in my heart told me to change my usual route." In Benaiah's camp, as he regained his strength, Ezra watched the shepherd go about his daily work. The way he knew each of his sheep by name, the way he found the best pastures even in the most arid desert, the way he led his flock with a mixture of firmness and gentleness, all of it spoke of a wisdom different from the one Ezra had always valued. One night, as they shared a simple meal under the stars, Benaiah began to tell a story that would make Ezra rethink everything he believed about success and purpose. A story that would change the course of his life forever. "You know, young man," Benaiah began, as the flames of the fire danced beneath the starry desert sky, "I was once like you. Years ago, I thought my plans were foolproof and my strength was enough." The shepherd paused, his eyes reflecting the stars above, before continuing, "One day, chasing a lost sheep, I found myself in a similar situation to yours. I got lost in the desert, confident that I knew the way back. That night changed my life forever." Ezra listened intently as Benaiah described how that experience led him to a deep understanding of dependence on God. The shepherd explained how he learned to recognize the Lord's voice not only in the big moments, but especially in the small, everyday decisions. "When you truly know your sheep," Benaiah explained, gesturing toward the sleeping flock, "you realize that each one has its own personality, its own fears, its own needs. It is impossible to guide them with technique and knowledge alone. It takes wisdom, the true wisdom that comes from God." Over the next few days, Ezra followed Benaiah as he went about his daily routine. He watched as the shepherd found water where there seemed to be none, how he foresaw storms before the first clouds appeared, how he knew exactly when a sheep needed special attention. "How do you know all these things?" Ezra asked one afternoon as he helped to treat an injured sheep. Benaiah smiled. "I don't know. It's the Lord who shows me. I've learned to wait on him, to trust his guidance more than my own experience. And that's how he led me to you that day." The shepherd's words sank deep into Ezra's heart, echoing his mother's warnings. There, in the middle of the desert, far from all the recognition he so desperately sought, he was beginning to understand the true meaning of wisdom. But a crucial decision still awaited Ezra, a choice that would define not only his destiny, but that of many others who would cross his path. When Ezra finally said goodbye to Benaiah, he was no longer the same young man who had gotten lost in the desert. His decision had been made. He would return to his village, no longer in search of personal glory, but with a much greater purpose in his heart. The journey back was different. With each step, he noticed signs of God's presence that had previously gone unnoticed. The flight of birds indicating sources of water, small plants revealing the safest path, the wind whispering the right direction. It was as if his eyes had been opened to a new dimension of reality. When he saw the familiar hills of his village, his heart raced. From afar, he recognized the figure of his mother, who seemed to be waiting for him. Deborah hugged him with tears in her eyes, but she did not say, "I told you so." Instead, she whispered, "The Lord has made your path straight, my son." In the months that followed, Ezra's transformation began to impact the entire community. His workshop became not just a place of work, but a center of learning. Young craftsmen came not just to learn craftsmanship, but to understand how to combine skill with dependence on God. "You see," he would tell his apprentices as they worked, "every piece of wood has its own story, its own knots and grain. Our skill is only truly useful when we learn to listen to both the material and the Creator who made it." In time, Ezra's fame grew even greater than before, but for different reasons. He was now known not only for his exceptional craftsmanship, but for the wisdom with which he counseled and taught. People came from far and wide to learn from him, not just about craftsmanship, but about living a God-guided life. Often, when someone praised him too highly, Ezra would tell his story in the desert. "It took me getting completely lost," he would say, "to find the true path." Sometimes God allows us to lose our own skills in order to find ourselves in his wisdom. Ezra's story has become a living testament to the fact that when we acknowledge the Lord in all our ways, he truly makes our path straight. His example continues to teach us that true wisdom lies not in trusting in our own talents, however great they may be, but in humbly submitting them to divine direction. And so, on the very hills where his journey began, Ezra discovered that his greatest gift was not his skill with his hands, but his ability to point other hearts to the true source of all wisdom, the God who turns pride into humility and loss into purpose. Please tell us in the comments which part of this story of profound transformation in God touched you the most. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on the notification bell, and also remember to hit the like button and share this video with someone you know who needs to hear this story today. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow for our next video.